Okay. Well, on behalf of Rutgers, on behalf of Thea and I, thank you. Thank you. This is a real pleasure. We often don't have an opportunity to look back. You know, we're being given that opportunity now. We're talking to fascinating people who've had an important role in the city. This conversation guide was just that. It was just kind of...
Well, I scribbled some notes on it.
But actually, we're starting these things with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know,
well, Rutgers graduate,
okay.
class of 1949. Just had our 60th reunion.
Wow.
And we managed to find about 20 guys still alive who showed up. At Rutgers, Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude. Most of my family are Rutgers graduates, too, including Mary, my daughter.
Right.
Who's done pretty well for herself.
Right.
And you were raised in where?
In Newark. I'm a city street guy. I'm born in Newark, so I know something about cities there. And then I worked for the Newark Evening News for about 20 years, and you know that was the big paper in the state, one of the top papers in the country. Still miss it. And I was there as political writer for most of that time, state and national, covering stuff like that. Then we had a very ill-timed strike, which closed the paper. And
That was in the 70s?
it was 19. I'll give you the exact date because I'll never
Okay.
forget it. I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
It was 1972.
Okay. I
And,
see that remember that.
And it was a long, bitter strike. And I had been asked by a couple of governors to join them in the communications area. Dick Hughes was one of them. And I said, no. I said, I love being a newspaper man. It's a love affair. And they would mention money. And I said, look, I took the vow of poverty when I became a newspaper man, you know. Then when the paper closed down, I got a call from Bill Cahill. And he said, I guess I got you now. He knew I had 4 kids and no income. I said, yeah, I think you probably have a much better time. So I went down and they created a position of State Director of Public Information, which was the first time they had that. It was usually the press secretary of the governor. So my responsibility was to do, I helped write major speeches, like State of the State, and had an overseeing responsibility for all the public information agencies, and worked closely with the governor on strategic kind of stuff like that. And in the meantime, we had a press secretary who handled the day-to-day media calls, you know, and it worked out pretty well. And to this day, they still use that system. I mean, you've got, they call it communications director or whatever they want to call it. I asked for public information director because I was still very sensitive to, you know, the flag business and all that stuff.
Right.
So, and then when Cahill left office, after the Republicans did their usual death job on their own, you know, right wing Charlie Sandman. Remember? You know, the interesting thing about the Republican Party in the state is we've only had 2 statewide candidates elected in the last, at least quarter century. Clifford Case, knocked out by a right-wing Republican, Bell, remember? Bill Cahill, knocked out by a right-wing Republican from South Jersey, Charlie Sandman. And that seems to be their modus operandi. They seem to rather lose with guys who agree with them on political philosophy than win. And we'll see what happens this time. You know, so far it looks a little different. There's a lot of other things.
Well, we did have Can.
You what?
We did have Tom Can.
Oh, you did. Yes, you absolutely did. Yeah, and we had Christy Whitman too.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
But so anyhow, that's where. And then when Cahill left office, I decided for once in my life I was going to try something where success or failure depended on me, not elections and strikes and papers going down the tubes and all that kind of stuff. And so I started my own little public relations thing. And one day I got a call from Larry Foster. I don't know if you remember him. He was the chief of. He came down with Phil Hoffman at the Johnson & Johnson. I had worked with him at the Newark News, And he said, you know, we're starting, he called me down, I had lunch with John Eldridge. First time we met him. And he said, we're trying to start something in the city. We had a public relations firm from around here, and it wasn't working out. And we wondered if you might be interested because you've got the combination of street smarts, whatever that is, and, you know, and the familiarity with New Brunswick from my Rutgers days, and some government experience now at the highest levels. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. First of all, I always liked the city. As grimy as it was getting, it was still a place where I got an education that I had never expected to get.
Right.
You know, without the GI Bill,
Right.
which to me is still the best public policy program ever devised in this country.
I assume you had left Newark. You weren't living in.
I lived in Union, where I still live on the suburban golf course there. So it worked out. We started slowly, and the first days were, you know, at times very, very problematic.
So when did you actually start? What?
And I would say I started, let's see, I'd say 1976, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. 75 or 76.
Okay.
Right when they were just getting started, as a matter of fact. In fact, Devco hadn't even been created. when I went to them, you know. Okay. Can I take this off?
Sure.
Yeah.
This, please make yourself comfortable.
Okay. No one's going to see me except on film, if they even see that.
Right.
I just had to meet someone today.
Oh, I thought so.
That's why I went on. I'm usually.
I said,
you
know, I want to look like a professor. So.
No.
Most of the professors don't wear jackets and ties.
Well, you look great. So.
Thank you. I'm not a professor.
I know.
My mother always said it was important to dress well.
Yeah.
Also
She's
to,
right.
also to think well.
She taught you well.
It can't hurt.
Right. That's true.
It can't hurt.
That's true.
Okay.
Actually, a little detour. What do you think was motivating? I mean, I can imagine, you know, Eldridge and J&J. I mean, what do you know? New Brunswick had experienced change in the post-war period. And what do you think?
Well, I think it
kicked in
was a combination of factors. One, I think the fact that after, you know, did pretty well right after World War II, but then you began it as highways were built and people were earning enough money to build to buy homes in suburbs. The exodus of residents, middle-income residents. I think the disturbances in the cities. They call them disturbances. I covered it, and it was a riot in Newark. You know.
But there weren't any here in New Brunswick.
Yes, there were.
Oh, there were.
Yes, there were. Nothing to compare to, but yes, there were disturbances in New Brunswick. Absolutely. The nature.
Someone mentioned to us that in the Kerner Commission report, which was a report on the riots, there was some specific discussion in New Brunswick, which we'll have to look at.
Yeah.
There were disturbances in the city.
Okay.
So I think that added. All over the country, people began to look more intently at what was going on in the urban centers. Up until now, everything was fine, you know. And then J&J had reached the conclusion that they were outgrowing where they were. So they had a decision to make. And the decision was, as you all know, and I think you've heard from many people, to go to these beautiful, beautiful acreage they had out in Somerset County, or to stay in the city, and you know, they had their corporate credo, which, believe it or not, they actually follow. I went in as a very cynical guy. I covered party platforms, you know, and I said, well, that's something you run on, and then you run away from afterward, you know. But they really believed it, and one of their planks is a responsibility to the communities in which they live. So that, but they didn't want to stay here if they became an oasis in the middle of decay.
Right.
So I think those three factors all began to push toward a sensitivity to what's going to happen, what the future of New Brunswick is going to be,
right.
And what is it, and are we going to be part of it, or help to shape it, and stuff like that. And I think that's what generated it.
If I could draw on your political expertise, what was, you know, mayors at that time, where were they in all this?
Well, the first mayor, I think I mentioned, I still can't remember his name.
Yeah, it was prior to Pat Sheehan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a political name because his father was involved, but he was more trouble than he was worth. He got involved in a lot of bad stuff, you know, and nothing positive came out of him. And Pat Sheehan was before the real revitalization started.
Right.
But you know, we were fortunate in that we had good relationships with City Hall.
And that was through the
When you say
J&J.
we had good, J&J had good, and your public
Yeah, well, the
relations
people
group?
who were starting to get interested
Right.
in doing something.
Mhm.
And not only were they was there a good relationship, they were very competent, smart guys. Johnny Lynch was one of the smartest guys I ever met.
Actually, if we could, on the who, you know, like who were some of the principal?
John Lynch.
John Lynch.
Cahill,
Mhm.
exceptionally
And John Lynch was a senator at the state senate?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Then he became a state senator,
Just
but
as an aside, is James Cahill related to the Governor Cahill? No, it's just a coincidence.
absolutely.
Okay.
That's actually very common.
I always
Irish thing.
wondered that,
Okay.
yeah, right, whether the two were related.
No, Bill Cahill was from
So,
South
so,
Jersey.
so John Lynch was what, an attorney in the city? I know his
Attorney in
father-
the city.
His father was, of course, had
His
been
father
very
had, so
prominent.
they had the political name.
Had his father been mayor too?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
If he was, it was way before I remember.
Okay.
His father was the state senator, and son far outshone the father. Let me put it that way. Father had certain problems, and very serious problems.
I see.
We used to. I do the legislative correspondence show, you know, and that was always one of the skit lines or something like that. But John Lynch started with the political name and the relationship with the Democratic organization, which in this town is the organization.
Right.
And he's smart, and he knew politics, and then he became a member of the legislature, and he was in a leadership position. So not only did we have a good relationship with him on a city level, but now we had a guy, for the first time probably in the Brunswick's history, because his father was not that effective, who could do things for us and advocate for New Brunswick, you know. And then Bill Cahill, not Bill Cahill.
Jim Cahill.
Yeah, I'm still calling him.
Right.
Jim Cahill came along, and he's a very competent guy, you know, well positioned within the organization, and we've gotten along well with him, and in their own ways, different personalities, very different,
Mhm.
but in their own ways, had foresight
Mm-hmm.
and thought they really should get involved. The city should be part of this process.
Mhm.
You know, politically, those are basically the ones. At that time, we did not have the kind of relationship with the county. I don't even remember what it was, you know, that we had developed later on under Dave Crayfield and people like.
And the county at that early point was just kind of there, but not really.
Yeah, well,
connected
you know,
to it.
you know, until they began to see things happening, you know, one of the things about revitalization is success attracts success. Nobody wants to invest money in what looks like a corporation or a business or a government or a city that's got problems ahead and no seeming plans and initiatives to address it, which we had. And then later, of course, Dave Crayfield has been very involved. The county has been a very important part of the process. As you know, the county owns State Theater,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that was very important for us. And then in Trenton, as I say, we wound up with a very powerful guy, much more powerful than strictly a state senator. He ran one of the most important county machines So we had some advantages starting out, and I think one of the things that very early penetrated these different turfdoms, and I think without it you can't really, is that we are all going to be regarded by the public as together. If we flop, then nobody's going to say it was New Brunswick Tomorrow's fault, or Devco's fault, or the cultural center, or City Hall. But as far as the public is concerned, we're all doing the same thing, and they don't differentiate. So, problems are problems for them, and you guys are in charge. It's your problem. But they seem to recognize that there was an interdependence that really was important to their own survival, as well as their obviously regard to make the city better, because most of them have been natives of the city anyhow.
Speaking of the natives, I mean, where was the local community in all this?
Well, that's interesting, because when they brought me in, we had a lot of militant people in the city who claimed that this would all be an effort at gentrification, get rid of the minorities, that it was that Johnson & Johnson was going to make a bundle of money, that kind of stuff. And they were very strong militants. I don't know where they all went, but and we did not get much help. I have to be earnest with you, from the faculty at Rutgers, some of them, who I guess I don't know what it was called in those days, urban planning or whatever.
Well, there was Tony Nelson.
Yes, Tony Nelson, right?
Right.
And there was a woman who I see is on your list, named Reveal Holcomb,
Rival.
who wrote one of the most negative reports I have ever seen about what we were trying to do. I laughed when I saw her name. I didn't think she was still around. And they were not supportive, in other words, And when you're in a city this small, such a major institution as the State University, boy, you sure want them to be part of you and behind you,
And the university administrator hierarchy, where were they on this radar?
I would say until Bloustein, not really involved. To me,
So Mason Gross was not involved.
He was in his old thing, and I don't remember the years Mason Gross. If we had started revitalization,
Bloustein started in early 70s.
Yeah, well, the revitalization movement started around the same time. I don't think Mason Gross didn't approve of what we were trying to do, but I think he had a lot of other things going for him. But I think at Bloustein, really, he was my favorite anyhow. I've been a lot of that.
And what was he?
He just got involved. He would come to meetings. He would speak at meetings. And I think that synergy started to reflect on some of the other people. So we got people serving on our boards who were pretty highly ranked at Rutgers.
Like Kenneth Wheeler.
Like Kenny Wheeler, and after him, Nancy Winterbauer, who's been on quite a while, and who I think has been fabulous for the board. And so we began to get direct Rutgers participation in. If Bloustein didn't come, he would usually send a pretty high level representative. In other words, he just didn't blow us off. And then, there's one question I saw here. Do you have any regrets about something? And my regret, one of them, is that I don't know how long Lawrence was the president. Too long.
Quite a few.
But that's the point.
Excuse me, I'm on tape.
So am I. Well, what the heck? You want me to tell you the truth, right?
Let me see. It was.
I'm beyond the statute of limitations.
I worked for Kenneth Wheeler. He hired me.
Yeah,
actually.
I know.
So it was from '89 to '92. to 2000.
And that was a very
It
important.
was like 14, 15
It
years.
was a very important period.
Yes.
And I felt that we lost that. That was a dead period as far as Rutgers' involvement, really top level involvement. He didn't seem to be interested. He came to a couple of meetings and then we never saw him again. So
With the current university administrations, it just
seems to be getting better at it.
Yeah, I actually just heard that McCormick's wife now is on the city markets.
Is she?
Involved in city
Yeah, no,
markets
I
and
think,
is actually getting involved. And
well,
at State Theater, maybe.
maybe.
So.
The fact of the matter is that this project that we just broke ground on directly affects Rutgers.
Right.
And then of course I guess McCormick had the vision of closing College Avenue and
Right.
So he had interest in making Rutgers part of the good stuff, the positive stuff that was happening, because some of it was actually really having a direct impact on Rutgers. Certainly the project up on the hill there is, has got great.
And I guess was Rockoff Hall proposed under McCormick, or had that actually started the planning under Fran Lawrence?
Not under Fran Lawrence.
So it started under McCormick. Okay. Right.
Actually, we've spoken about others, but if we go back to, you left state government, and then John Heldrick asked if you could come. Just speak more about your involvement, the roles and positions.
At that time, and what Johnson & Johnson said is, we're deeply involved in what's happening. They need certain skills and resources which they either don't have or can't afford to have. And you have the kind of background that could be very helpful, not only in giving advice and counsel, on everything from political matters to, tactical policy. So we would like you to be a resource that we contribute to NBT, Devco, and when the Cultural Center came around, help them with their PR. And I have done that over the years. I still am Thea. I'm not a former.
You're still on their. They still hire your firm.
They hire me.
They hire you. Okay.
They don't know how old I am, so I don't tell them that.
You still have your firm, or is your
well, I call
work?
It's Baglivo Public Relations, which is me.
Do you have any job other than
I have other clients.
one? You do? Okay.
No, I learned very early. Don't put your whole future into anybody,
Right.
because you never know what's going to happen.
So they felt that they had no one on the J&J staff, because certainly they have a big communications department, but that's marketing their firm.
They were
so they didn't
were
have
specialists
politics.
really. Yeah, they were specialists really in corporate kind of stuff, and did a very good job on it.
Right.
But none of them had government background.
Right.
None of them really, tell you the truth, had much newspaper background either,
Right.
which was, in those days was important. Now, who knows?
So can you talk about maybe some of the specific things you were doing as far
Well,
as
let me tell you about one of the first things that I got deeply involved in. As I said, we had a lot of critics, and as you know, I guess I was guilty of it as a newspaper man, it's the critics who get all the space. So when they were talking about making final decisions about staying in New Brunswick or getting deeply involved or committing resources of both money and people, they said to me, hey, people don't want us to do this. I said, how do you know? Well, they said, don't you read the papers? I said, that doesn't reflect what the average guy who lives in New Brunswick thinks. I mean, he works, comes home, gets his supper, picks up the newspaper, puts the ball game on, and falls asleep. So they said, well, so how are we going to find out what they think about it? So I said, how about a poll? And he said, well, who would do it? I said, well, I would recommend not a private professional for-profit firm. I said Rutgers, Eagleton. I've always had good experiences with them because I used to be able to lecture over there sometimes. I said, at the Eagleton Institute, they have a poll. And I said, and one thing about it is, it's very difficult to say that a university, particularly prestigious one like Rutgers, would have a poll that would say to us, "What do you want us to find?"
Right.
Which is a
Right.
charge, rightfully or wrongfully, that they make on other
Yes.
polls.
Right.
You hired us, and we know what you really want.
Mm-hmm.
So we went in. So they said, okay, go talk to them. So I talked to them, and they were very interested. They had never done anything quite like that. And they said, but we don't know what we're going to find, but whatever we find, we find. Whether you're pleased with it or not. So I said, go ahead. We rolled the dice, and it came out pretty positive for the people. For a city that was going downhill, and had the usual blahs at that time all cities were experiencing. It was pretty good.
So the poll asked how people currently thought of the city, or what they would think if J&J stayed and
Well, no, we didn't get
redeveloped?
involved in. We didn't get involved in J&J.
So it was, what do you think currently
What do you
about
what
the
do you
state of the city?
what do you think about living? Incidentally,
Okay.
some of the questions.
Yeah, still remain, right?
In fact, I brought the latest one for you.
Oh, okay.
We've done that because tracking
Yeah,
becomes important.
right.
I want to know if you don't like me now, and we work for a while together, and you change your mind, negatively or positively, and that's what we track. So
Right.
a good number of those questions are repeats. You'll see from the very beginning, and that's how we're able to say, how much percentage-wise the favorability of the residents and all.
Can you speak to how the Eagleton poll may have shaped policies that were taken that may not have been taken in the absence
Well,
of...
for one thing, it showed us, right off the bat, it demonstrated that all the people in New Brunswick were not anti-renewal. It also showed the people at J&J who were going to be putting up the money, that the people felt good about them. It also showed that people felt pretty good about Rutgers. You always heard about, town and gown, how they fight with each other and all. Well, it didn't show that. It showed phenomenal positive ratings of J&J, phenomenal positive ratings of Rutgers, which have continued to today. 80%, whatever it is. So that was important. It suddenly made the opinion makers and the money providers at Johnson & Johnson aware that this was not a lost cause. So that particular phase of it, the people don't want it, and all that kind of Eagleton poll, and we did it every 2 years, and we have done it. There's no poll like it in the country.
So when the poll was started, really the final decision on J&J staying and investing was mainly...
They wouldn't put it that succinctly. I felt when the reaction came to me, the people don't really, why should we force stuff that they don't really want? That's when I said, well, how do you know that? And that's when they said, well, read the papers and this one and that. We're going to make a bundle of money on this. J&J is, and we're pushing the blacks out, the poor out. And I think the way we framed those questions, working closely with the people at Eagleton, we did not.
Janice Ballou, right?
Janice Ballou, and before her was a guy who came back. He left and then came back. What's his name?
Cliff?
Cliff
Lucan, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the first one. And then we had some other ones who now do their own polls. Mom's poll is
Right. Pat
Berry,
Right.
like that.
Right.
And somebody went up to Connecticut. So
Yeah, right.
we worked very closely with them. And it was not us dominating them or them dominating us. And when we got the answers, they were going to write a narrative interpreting these things. And I had to look at it. And then if I saw stuff that I thought was a misinterpretation, we would talk about it. And sometimes they would say, no, probably right about that. Or they would say, no, we don't want to change this. We feel too strongly about it. So that poll, over the years, has been a guide to us if we're doing something right, or if suddenly we see them saying, "What are you building all those apartment houses down there for? You know, what the hell? We're never going to live in them." And so you're looking for danger signals too. And there have been some changes in strategy. I can't cite them for you, but it's been used. John Eldridge, for example, I think he goes to bed with that pole at night. He's the only, as far as I know, he and I are the only guys that have read it from cover to cover. He reads all the tables and all that stuff. So that was an important thing then.
We've observed that pole is almost like a consumer marketing.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Right.
For a company that personifies consumer marketing.
Absolutely. But in here, they started out with a wrongful perception. That, whereas on their other products they start out and then decide how to market it. So now you are able to dissuade people who were overemphasizing the impact of criticism from either the activists or some of the Rutgers urban professors. Now you had to know, well, okay, we think maybe we ought to do this. But can we do it? Is this city salvageable? So how do we do that? So we bring in the American Cities Corporation, Rouse, part of the Rouse Group.
Leo Molinari.
Who you ought to put on your list.
We
will talk.
Yeah, we will be.
And they were brought in as just like a premier example.
Come in and look at the city. Do you think we can save this city? Does it have strengths? Does it have weaknesses? Does it have assets? And when that came back, it not only said that before that, the stage was set by Dick Sellars, who was then chairman of the board of Johnson & Johnson. He made a speech before a group of business people called New Brunswick at the Crossroads. And he raised those issues. Is this city, can it be saved? Should it be saved? How should it be saved? That kind of stuff. And that really triggered, I think motivated a lot of people who were on the sidelines saying, should we get involved in this thing, or is it going to flop like most other cities have flopped?
And some of those sideline people being
businessmen, professionals, educators.
By the way, did you write the New Brunswick at the Crossroads speech?
I helped on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I helped on it. Yeah. But he himself was terrific. He's still alive tonight, but very, very sick.
I know.
I don't even know if he can interview him.
Right.
He talks to John. He lives on his yacht or whatever it is. He talks to John every once in a while, but he's still mentally sharp. But it's difficult for him to talk, whereas some of the other people you might want to talk to are not even able to talk. They've got the Alzheimer's and stuff, which is a terrifying thing when you see guys who are geniuses and they're susceptible to it. You say, what about a poor brain like mine? What the hell is going to happen to me? So that came back, and so he set the stage, and then he led the way in bringing in American cities. And that now, Molinari wrote the report, came back and said, yeah, if you do it right, this city is salvageable. Why? Well, first of all, it's manageable in size. 40,000 people. It is not in such a state of decay and advanced urban, because when I first came here, they said they're going to drive me around the city and show me all these terrible things that are happening. So they drove me around some neighborhoods that they thought were terrible, and I'm looking at them. And I'm growing up in Newark, and I said, in Newark, this would be a pretty good residential neighborhood. So they had a misconception about that.
Right.
And so he said, it's not that far gone. You're catching it. When Sellars coined the phrase at the crossroads, he was right. We could go down. The trend was definitely down as business and residents left. And then he said, what you have to do is you got to have a true partnership. He said everybody talks about public-private partnerships. In most cases, it's a slogan, you know. But you really need one in the city, you know, with the community, the corporate interests, and the professionals, and everything. You need that kind of a thing, but mostly public-private, and you certainly need city government with you, because no matter what you do, city government has the final say. If they're not going to give you a building permit to do something you want to build right here, you're dead in the water. So he proposed creating this kind of an organization, and that was the beginning of the New Brunswick Tomorrow process. Mainly because of
I guess separately Devco. You know,
separate. At first, New Brunswick Tomorrow did it all, and you know, looking for potential economic development things as well as social issues, and then they realized a couple of things, which I think made us successful where others have failed. You know, in addition to the obvious assets like Rutgers and J&J and county seat and all that kind of stuff, they realized that if you have a true partnership there, you know, where you're working together, it can work. But and Molinari said, none of these can work by themselves. You can't do it privately only. You can't do it publicly only. You can't do it community only. If you don't do it together, and I think that was a fundamental turning point in planning New Brunswick's future, that they decided that you can't just do bricks and mortar.
I guess there's a partnership approach, and very early on, you know, going back quite a few decades, saying we need the bricks and mortar and the social side,
right.
which New Brunswick
That's what we did.
Tomorrow.
It was actually a stated mission, policy, you know, at that time. We had to do them both together. So then, the logical step was to create, since they were really fundamentally different kinds of approaches to revitalization, to create Devco as the business development arm, and J&J and NBT under John Heldrich, who was the founding chairman, concentrate on making certain that some of the benefits of economic development and renewed tax revenues are used
the social side.
disposals, like, you know, and public, and incidentally, essential public services like street cleaning and stuff like that. And I think, you know, then they had. Well, let me just give you a figure that I did a little research because, you know, my brain is getting old.
You seem to be remembering a lot of detail, so.
Well, when you live through something like that, you know, this forced me to start thinking about it, you know. So I enjoyed the process that you're undergoing.
That's good.
Because it forced me to do stuff that I had taken for granted and almost forgotten. In 1943, the Central Business District of Brunswick was collecting $1.8 million in taxes.
1.8 million in taxes.
Right. In the early 1970s, that figure had dropped to $300,000 in taxes. Now that's a startling figure. How the hell are you going to provide all the services?
And of course, costs have gone up.
Sure. You know. So I just thought that, and we've worked together, not always in harmony. You know, there are times, you know, when.
And the together is the public and private, and then the different actors in the city.
Then the different actors and individuals and goals and all. And the one thing I think we've been very fortunate in New Brunswick is, because Molinari pointed out too, as another important factor in renewing the city leadership. When you had a guy like John Eldridge who come, you know, I mean, he just, to this day, you know, even though he's retired, so-called retired,
Right.
he's working harder today than he did there before. You had top corporate leaders like Jim Burke, Dave Clare, guys like that, who were interested in it, who decided to go ahead and build here. Fundamental decision. James A. leaves the city, none of this happens. I think very little happens like that. So but that decision itself was based on their, I don't know if you could say confidence, or such, that something good was going to happen in the Brunswick, that they would not be left here. Something positive was underway, both from the point of view of public receptions and plans for the future.
John had mentioned some influence from the greater Hartford process.
He talks about it.
Was that?
I didn't go up there with them. No.
So that was a very early on.
Yes, Hartford was. There were not many cities you could go to and see success. Hartford, for some reason, at that time, was. They had a very progressive mayor.
I can see where they would see in Hartford the main corporate entities, you know, the insurance companies,
right,
and viewed in the same light.
And they had a process. They call it the Hartford process. I don't think it has continued with the success that it had then, whereas we have. But yeah, he went up there to see that, and came back, you know, convinced that we were doing the approach we were using is correct, and also recognizing again that our starting point wasn't nearly as difficult as theirs with the size of the city,
right,
and the decay of the city.
Now, could I just ask you, talk about leadership in Heldridge, which we understand, and Sellars was really the first executive there to get this started. So, and I certainly know who Jim Burke is, and I guess John said that he's probably not able to be interviewed. But what about David Clare? What was his position?
Same thing.
Really?
It's terrifying.
Yeah. See, we should have done this 10 years ago.
I mean, well, I don't think we had a good story to tell you 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it really, off the record, you know, it's terrifying when you see men of that stature and that capability suddenly lost to you while they're still living, you know.
Yeah.
And Al Rocco is the same way now, as you probably know.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Really?
He's a very good friend of mine.
Wow.
So if you can take us a little, we're now launched with Brunswick Tomorrow and Devco in the partnership process. I mean, I know of some of the early projects, but if you could just talk about them.
Well, first of all, once we announced that we were going to have this, you talk about expectations suddenly raised among the people, right? Well, you don't go out and start building a building or anything like that. So we decided we had to have something visible, even if it was not a big deal, that they could see. So Johnson & Johnson built that little park on the corner there, which is still a nice little park. The railroad trestle, I guess it is, on College Avenue, on George Street rather, just before you come to Old Queens, was rusting.
Right.
I mean, it was ugly.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right? It was really ugly. So we said, let's paint the damn thing. You know, paint it. Say the New Brunswick or whatever, healthcare city, whatever. So there was some visible things that they could see. And billboard. There was a big billboard right on the corner there in New Brunswick Tomorrow. So we tried to give them whether it didn't hurt, but it was the only thing we could do at the time. And then we needed something more substantial than obviously. There was a hole in the ground up on George Street, next to what they call Plaza One building, and it was there. It was cleared. And
that had been cleared from urban renewal.
I guess a long time ago, you know. And that happened in a lot of cities, you know. They tore down stuff.
A lot.
I think it's happening again now with the economy. There's making lots of those. But it was there. And IMPay had suggested a commercial building there, which he designed. And so we started to work on Plaza 2. You didn't have to worry that much about acquisition. It was, or demolition.
Now, Plaza 1 had existed already?
Yeah, Plaza 1 was there.
Was there already?
Yeah, Plaza 1 is the
white.
white
White
one.
one. And that had been what? That was, who
Business
did that, or
building.
who knows?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I wasn't.
But we now have we have the assembled site for Plaza 2, and then paid.
It was the first real commercial building built in New Brunswick in the memory of anybody, and that helped a lot to get it
And was that
started.
envisioned that who would occupy? Was that envisioned J?
J took some of it, but other people took parts of it too. Insurance companies, like that. But it was a very attractive building, as an IMP building would be.
And by that time, IMP had already been contracted to design the headquarters?
IMP had been, I forgot to give you that. IMP was brought in once it was decided that the public would be receptive, two, that the city had the potential. So what do? So we brought in IMP. I have to say this, the quality of the consultants that we engaged very early was superb. American Cities, Rouse, IMP, so let's see.
So the decision on building the headquarters here, that precedes the Plaza 2, or
No.
at the same time?
No, a little after. And incidentally, one of the things I found, and I don't know how many people have this, this was the plan that IMP, and it's extraordinary, because he said, over here you ought to build a hotel, over here you ought to build a cultural center, over here you ought to do this. And it's unbelievable. Whether we did it deliberately or we're lucky, and I'm going to let you have this for a while. I thought you might be
Okay.
interested.
Okay, we'll make a copy and get it back to you.
Yeah, I don't think there are many around, but
Now, was Pay working with American City, or
No.
they were in
we
that
bought
initial
in
effort, and then they're
once American City said, yeah, you can do it, but you got to do certain things, their partnership and all that stuff. And then we said, okay, we can do it. It was staged, First, the public, was the community opposed to it. Do we have the assets to do it? And then, so what do we do? And we brought him in, and he did this thing. So, and I'll let you have it, but you're going to find out the downtown plan, commercial plaza, this is what I'm just talking about. The cultural center, commercial plaza, there it is.
So that may be one of the few plans that a lot of it came to fruition.
Yeah.
Well, I was amazed. I had forgotten that he had so directly pinpointed stuff.
Yeah, John Heldrick said he took them up on a helicopter.
Yeah. He had actually pinpointed stuff. Sometimes you get a conceptual plan, which is just that.
Now, we are not going to interview Pay, but his colleague Harry Cobb.
Henry Cobb did a lot of the
Henry
work
Cobb.
for Pay.
Right.
You got him?
Yes.
Great. You want to take
Yeah,
this?
sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, so I was amazed with that, and so we were off and running. The initial.
So
We understood.
You get American Cities doing that initial, then Pay is brought in with sort of like
Conceptual plan. What do you do
conceptual
here? And also, although from the beginning there was recognition that you just can't build your way into revitalization, as we said. You had to take care of the people, social services, and all that kind of stuff. So,
Where was the city's planning entity? Were they kind of there but not there?
I don't even know. I never dealt with him much. The guy that got there now is pretty good.
Glenn Patterson.
Yes, he's pretty good.
My student.
Huh?
My student.
Well, despite that, he's still pretty good. No, he really is good. He's not impressive when he makes a presentation.
Yeah.
But if you listen to him and see what he's saying, he's a very competent guy. So
He seems a little grumpy.
yeah, well, that's
He should be optimistic.
When you get
And I've been trying to nail him down for an interview.
Yeah.
No?
Okay, so we have the city, again, the J&J headquarters, and then lots of other projects, but what do you think were some of the important ones that really changed?
I think that the first one, the Plaza 2 building, because of that, for the first time, they saw it, and it was a handsome building, and it was the first one that anybody could remember. I think that was important. I think our, and this was Sellars again, capturing the State Theater, which had by then.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a porno house.
Right.
You know, if you walked into it, you couldn't see 2 feet ahead of you. It was so black. Not that I spent any time there, of course, but we wanted that captured. You know, it was a natural, beautiful theater with the great, you know,
Right.
and Sellars, with out of his own pocket, I think, put down a deposit or held it, and that saved that building for us. And I think if you ask people in other parts of the state, the cultural center is the one thing they mention. Our restaurants they mention, and I think it has made New Brunswick,
Which is heavily linked to the cultural center.
yes, absolutely. Oh, no question. You know, it's made New Brunswick a destination city. You know, people come here for that. But I'm sure the buildings are great. You know, they like to see. But I think, why do they come here from other places? That's it. And so I thought our capturing of the State Theater was important.
How about the Hyatt?
The Hyatt was extremely important.
Was that difficult to bring about, to bring in?
Well, the historic preservationists held us up for a while. It cost us a lot of money.
That was on Hiram.
Well, that was
There was a Texaco station there.
Yeah, it was a parking lot and a gas station there.
Yeah, so why would historic preservation,
You asked me.
well, he's a historic preservation.
I think they said something about they thought they might find some privies down there.
Oh, I
And then
see.
the privies would tell them what they were eating at the time.
Yeah,
So we had to hire,
an archaeologist.
we had to hire the same guys that were telling us that you can't do this. They made a lot of money on us, believe me.
I see,
You know,
okay.
so I hope I don't sound cynical, but it's true.
Okay.
So we had to go through that, and then once they decided,
And I guess Hiram Market too.
well, the higher market was another ball. That was even tougher.
On the back end of it.
That was even tougher, I think, to get through the historic preservation. And in fact, Devco hired a very, I forgot the name of the firm, but it was a well-known firm to come in and survey it and see. And they gave a report which said that some of the buildings, historic, were crumbling and you couldn't be saved. So could you redevelop an area where you had one building that's still lasting, the other one's falling down? You'd have to do hopscotch all over the place. And they finally got permission to do it step by step. That was the cause of a lot of controversy in town, you know. We saved the synagogue.
And
but-
part of the Old Bay building. Kenneth Wheeler said he'd made a big stink in some part of that building.
Yeah. And so that was, that was the difficult part in some of those early projects. But one of the interesting phenomena that happened is when we started to try to build things, and Chris Palladino, well, he wasn't here, but he can tell you more about it. It was all mostly government investment, UDAG funds and
Right.
stuff like that. You know, nobody was going to invest their own money here. But as they began to see that, you know, things were happening, little by little by little, and now they kill each other to get the contracts to build. The developers are all fighting with each other, which I thought was very, very interesting. But that was another thing we had to go through at the beginning. How do we fund these things? And we had a lot of UDAGs. I don't even know if they have
Well, I
UDAGs
think on
anymore.
a per capita basis, New Brunswick was either first or second.
I think they're right up there.
In the capture.
Yeah.
And that was due to good political connections.
No question.
That was Lynch and Graybill?
Well, not so much Graybill. Graybill was a very good guy around here, but I think if you sent him to Washington, it wouldn't have worked out.
So to what would you attribute, being so successful?
I think again, even government doesn't like to give grants to failure. They want to be part of the success story too, so they can brag about it and help cut ribbons, which they love to do,
So who made the case? Did you make the case? Did Lynch make the case?
I think Lynch made the case. We made the case. Johnson & Johnson made the case. But what helped make the case was we now have something to show.
And the something to show was Plaza 2?
Plaza 2, the State Theater, the hotel, a couple of other little things. So that not only encouraged private investors, but as I say, government loves to brag about, look what we did, That's the advantage of incumbency, even though it doesn't seem to be working so well right now. But
Did state government help in securing any of these grants? Or?
I think they helped us sometimes on permitting. Where at first they were a little reluctant. Again, they saw things were happening positively, and they weren't. And also, we had not had any scandal in the city, which when you're starting to do all this stuff, the thing that brought Lynch down had nothing to do with anything that happened in the city.
Right.
And it's remarkable because so much money was being invested and spent. Now we see 44 guys go away for taking $5,000. We're not even big time corruption.
Right.
I think state government helped, federal government helped with the UDAG things. Investors started to take a piece of things, and and plus I have to tell you about leadership. Chris Palladino's unbelievable. He can irritate the hell out of you sometimes, but he is a genius, and he gets things done. And he had Zoffinger in there with him, who also was a very successful businessman and knew how to turn things around. We had a good board there. We had, and that's another reason for our success. I think we have had good people serving on the boards of NBT, the kind we wanted, religious, labor, community people, Devco people, business guys, bankers and stuff like that, group financiers. The Cultural Center now is a good mix of people.
So let me just ask about the community opposition. How was that dealt with? You were a PR person.
Well, we tried.
So how did you involve people who were objecting?
If they were making as they were allegations that had no basis in fact, like Johnson & Johnson's making all this money and stuff like that, and this is not really helping create employment as our unemployment rates were going down. So I responded to that. Also, we did not only use reaction communications, which I don't, it's okay, but we did aggressive stuff. We started, we did our annual report, I don't know if you've seen it, and we decided, and it lists all the, accomplishments of the past year, and we decided we were going to send that to every household in the city, which I think was expensive, but...
You were sending what now?
The annual
report for NBT.
Okay.
And then we decided, how do we make that even more effective? Well, as the immigration, we decided to do the annual report in both Spanish and English. Also, we decided, it's great so they know what's going on, but what can we give them that comes in handy to them? So we attached it, we put in a detachable page at the end, we take a tear off, which had all the numbers they needed. Emergency numbers, city numbers, all that kind of stuff. And I think that has had an impact on the public. And that's the kind of stuff we've been doing. And when we had major announcements to make, I did it. In those days, we had a lot more media people around to cover stuff than we do now.
Right.
And then you gotta you gotta arrest 44 people to get them to get interested.
Yeah.
I know there were
Yeah.
some community leaders involved, like Roy Epps.
Yes,
Can you speak about that?
Yeah, Roy Epps was a founding member of the board of directors of New Brunswick Tomorrow. So they did not only pick safe things, but they picked a guy who was independent and would challenge certain things. That's it. So he's there and still there, you know, and still very active. And I think if certain projects or certain services, because he's on the NBT board, were being discussed, his input was important, because that's what he is. It's the, you know, a service organization. Well, that's not really the group you should target. These are the kids who have a problem. So we had him on there. We have other community people on there. We have the.
I know some of the church leaders were they?
Oh,
where were they in all this?
Yes, very active. Particularly one, Martinez, Reverend Martinez, whose church does a lot of social service stuff, and with whom we helped, you know, to fund some.
This is now the Brunswick Tomorrow.
Yes, the Brunswick Tomorrow, right. The separation is there, except when there's overlapping on things like who's going to work at the new hotel, who those jobs going to go to. So we worked with the NBT worked on it, and with the Devco people, and in fact, I've come up with a pretty good record. Even though when they first built the Hyatt, a lot of these activists who were still around there picketed and said, we've got to make sure that the New Brunswick people. So we had to do training and stuff, and we did the second hotel much better because we learned from the first. We learned things.
What about the
second
house?
hotel be
Eldridge.
What about the housing? I mean, I remember the moving of people out of.
Well, one of the things I had to try to do, which wasn't easy, was the press focuses on the most pitiful situations, but they don't follow up. We had a pair of brothers that lived on Highland Market, and they didn't want to get out. They had no running water, they had no heat, but they didn't want to move, and the press loved them, you know. We finally got them out of there and gave them better housing than they'd ever seen in their lives. And I said to the reporters, and I'm still basically a journalist, and they know me. I said, one of your faults is you highlight the hardship part of it when they get thrown out, but did you ever follow up to see where they wound up? Because our relocation has been excellent on the thing, and of course we had Section 8s to use too. So that's.
Well, I guess we could talk about.
And incidentally, there weren't a lot of residents in the Hiram area. There weren't a lot of residents where J&J built its complex. Very few, and we already discussed. There were almost no residents where we built the Hyatt.
Right.
It was a parking lot and stuff like that. So either by luck or stuff like that.
But the more recent ones, like the Atlantic Highlands area and over here behind, closer to us, there were projects and other houses.
Well, I guess there were like almost 3 pots of housing.
Yeah.
The initial thing was by Hiram Market.
The
The
townhouses.
townhouses.
Right.
Which then was followed by some rental.
Yeah, pretty substantial.
The Hope 6 was the subsidized,
Yes.
which was part of a national effort.
That's exactly
of
right.
saying high-rise public housing was failed, and we're going to replace it with more, lower. Okay. The most recent thing done by Matrix and Roseland, which is almost like totally market-driven. I think in part was, or would you agree, was in part developers came in because they saw there was a market.
Make a buck here.
And they could get approvals faster rather than
Right.
slower, where they couldn't elsewhere. Do you think that was a factor?
I think that was a factor. I think we had a track record, let me put it that way. Whereas in a lot of the places where they wanted to go in for development, they were really among the earliest people who wanted to make these major developments. Well, we had done it already. We had done it without it at first, unfortunately. We would have loved to have had, but we had done it. And then they saw other developers coming in, building buildings and doing well. The UMDMJ building, that was another one, you know. And again, it sounds trite. Success breeds success. Success attracts people who want to invest and make money, you know. And that has been a major selling point. You know, Chris Palladino is a very friend of mine, and we talk about, you know, a lot of these buildings came under them recently, and when we started, we had very little. He said, yeah, but you set the foundation for us. You guys shed the blood. What you left us was a city that was on its way and not as hard. You guys were getting whatever you wanted to do. Somebody was out there protesting against it, or a Rutgers professor was writing a report saying it was no good.
Right.
I was looking for Baglavio Holcomb's. I can't find it anymore.
I think we might have it.
That's okay. It's not important.
You've spoken about some of the outcomes. I guess with hindsight, you know, things you're most proud of, things you may have perhaps.
Why don't you put it another way? One of the questions I would have hoped, and this is not that I think, it's not something that we did wrong. I would have hoped that we would have been in a position to do things that we weren't, and maybe still aren't completing. The neighborhoods, you know, that's we knew that before we had even addressed the neighborhoods, we had to rebuild the economic heart of the city, because that's where the money comes from, you know, and it was not as fast as we were. A little unrealistic too, you know. We were all eager to go on, and I would have hoped that we would have been in an economic position to do more in the neighborhoods. And
things like, and imagine, but things like what?
Help fix it up, help fix their buildings, you know. Do some green spaces for play. You know, the city has done things like that with the stadium and all that stuff. And
do you see Devco, the Brunswick tomorrow, moving, you know, to that neighborhood level?
I think Devco is beginning to. That's not New Brunswick tomorrow's ball game. New Brunswick tomorrow, most of its social services are exactly where in the neighborhood. So the dichotomy is different, you know. New Brunswick tomorrow is not building social centers down here.
Right.
You know, they're doing it up there. But it's a dynamic process that's going on around here. You know, there's no end in sight, and particularly with the new immigration status now. You know, I think we're half. The census is going to be very interesting. I think we're almost half Hispanic now.
Right.
I think so. You know, and that opens up another area that we've got to consider is to help. And most of them are working. They're entrepreneurial, and we got to help them. And I don't know if we have programs like that. I also think they established, it's 30 years ago, on our 30th anniversary, the Eldridge Institute for Urban Fellows or Leadership. You know, one of the things that bothers me is I don't see. We started a little too late. Enough young blood getting us involved. I don't, you know, and they've had some graduating classes, and the people have you know, gotten involved in some community things, but and then just forgetting the numbers, we have lost too many real leaders. You know, what happens when something happens when John Eldridge? You know, I mean, he's irreplaceable as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
He is the. Whenever there's a problem in the city, who the hell does everybody go to? Eldridge, because everybody trusts him. The politicians trust him. The investors trust them, the community trusts them. That's irreplaceable. And that's where I was hoping some leaders would emerge. But it's a different ballgame now.
Yeah.
You know, the young guys are too busy raising families and it's trying to support themselves. So that bothers me a little bit, you know, because I am convinced, as is John, he and I worked very close together, you know, that we worry about what he calls the next generation of revitalists. And I don't know. You know, that institute is addressing the problem.
And where is that? Is that out of NBT?
No, it's well, NBT started, but it's out of Rutgers. It's out here somewhere.
Oh, you're talking about our Center on Workforce Development.
No, I'm not, because I
think there are fellows. There's
Fellows?
like a fellows program.
there's an institute. I don't know if it's in here.
We'll find out.
Yeah, you'll find it, but there is. Look,
It's a Heldridge Institute?
it's called the John J. Heldridge Institute for Leadership.
Okay.
And they have like two categories: leadership today and leadership tomorrow.
Okay.
And when they graduate from leadership today, they go to leadership tomorrow. But I don't, and it's not necessarily the fault of the process. We don't have guys like that around anymore.
Right.
Really, anyway, in any walk of life, you know, those people are, you know, very rare. What you try to do is make up, I think, in numbers, what you can't make up in individual quality.
Right.
And that's what this institute is designed to do. And we're seeing some young people who come forward.
Do you think, with the benefit of hindsight, that more of the existing buildings could have been saved, or what's your?
I'm not in a position to make that evaluation. I don't see where is the major demolition taking place in the city. Hiram Market. We addressed that as well as we could. I'm sure some people disagree with us, but this firm came in and said, "Look, this building is historic, but it's falling down. You can't preserve it. The one next to it's okay, and then 2 doors away there's another one." So they said, "What are you going to build here? You know, if you want to really address and come up with a, you know, it's not going to be the historical, traditional thing that you had at one time, but it ain't here anymore anyhow." And that was it. So this, you know, that thing was a planned demolition, which they didn't go into haphazardly and quickly.
Yeah.
The Hyatt,
Was a tax
Yeah.
increase.
where J&J built, and incidentally, one of the interesting things about the J&J thing is they made a decision when they started to buy that they would never go into what do you call it when you can't agree and you go into this arbitration.
Eminent domain.
Yes. J&J said, "We are not going to do that." As a result, they got held up. But it was, and of course, another issue that seems to be surfacing now.
And they didn't.
Am I going too long?
They didn't want to go into eminent.
No, I have another meeting I have to go to at 11:30, but
They didn't want to go into eminent domain because of the controversy involved. Or?
And making it look like big guys were eating little guys, you know. And it was if you can afford it, it's a smart PR thing. But most people can't afford it.
right.
For example, Tumulty's,
Yeah.
that guy, he had a place over there on a site. They bought that place, his old place, for $2 million.
How transferable do you think what happened in New Brunswick is to other places?
Very difficult, for a number of reasons. Size, the lack of a J&J, the lack of a state university here, the lack of a natural asset like the river, which I think we were late in getting around to, you know, those kinds of things. I just don't, and maybe the leadership we had here. Not to say that there aren't other places, but that's it. And to this day, the state of what we would call our most debilitated neighborhoods is nowhere near as bad as like where I grew up, you know. So I think it'd be very difficult to duplicate all those things. It's amazing we were able to do it in a city of this size, you know. But I would say Devco, I was never even concerned of whether we were going to be a model or not.
Mhm.
You know, it was not, never even thought about it.
Could I ask you just sort of a
Personal
technical
question?
thing? No. Well, do you have a collection of documents related to this?
I don't have a lot of documents. I have a lot of things written about us. I brought some of the documents here.
Articles. I guess what I'm wondering, because one of the people is on, an advisory committee with us is the university archivist, Tom Frusciano, who already has some documents about New Brunswick, and part of also what we were going to do with this project was try to collect
Well,
and
at the right time,
organize the
at
documents.
the right time, I
So-
got some of the stuff.
So you would have some at your office?
Yes.
Okay.
And I bought a few things here that I thought you might be interested
Okay.
in.
Can we make copies of these and get them back to you?
Yeah, in your own time. Yeah, I mean, it's not very,
Okay.
We've mentioned some people that we're seeing, and it was also on the list. Anyone that just...
Well, Leo Molinari fits me.
Yeah, we were set up to...
Anyone not on our list?
You don't have anybody from, that I could see, other than Heldrich, from Brunswick Tomorrow, that brings you.
Well, I contacted Jeff Vega, so
Okay,
he
that's it.
and Nancy Winterbauer
Got it.
and
Talk to Roy Epps?
Roy Epps we have an interview set up with.
Good.
Steve O'Connor? No?
I don't think so.
Well, he was
This
there
is-
for a long time.
I know, but
He was
it
not
was
helpful.
no, he wasn't. It was not a distinguished era for. This is
I
very
see.
much between us because I like him and all, but I would not regard
Was Ted
him.
Hargrove still
he's-
around?
Ted Hargrove's still around. He
What
was
is he
working for
doing?
Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
Okay.
He's still around, and I would go to him well before I went to O'Connor.
Okay.
The one thing that Ted gives you is he circulated more into the community. He was a minister. He's a minister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he came from he came from a community organization in Newark called the Valesburg Organization. But Hargrove, his specialty was going out into the community. 'Cause that's what he did as a minister, and also the religious people. Felt he was one of them.
Did John Cooney get involved in all? No? Okay. He was a minister. I don't know if you remember him. He's
Yeah,
now passed
I
away, I think.
I don't know, but I don't think no. He didn't.
Okay.
He was never
What
there.
about Don Edwards?
A little bit with the cultural center, but not
Not
big
beyond
deal.
that.
No.
Okay, but so Kenneth Wheeler was
Kenneth
probably
Wheeler was
more
fine,
active,
yeah.
and Nancy Winterbauer.
Nancy Winterbauer is my favorite. So
Okay.
that's personal as well as.
We did interview Eric Krebs.
Oh, good.
That was interesting because he talked about the original theaters up on Easton Avenue in the 1960s and having, interesting beginnings, and then
Yeah.
what happened over time.
Well, the whole Crossroads.
Yes.
Talk about
Right.
where they were functioning on the borderline
Yes.
of the Highland Market. And
Right.
you walked upstairs and you didn't know if you were going to make it or not. And,
Yeah.
and then, George Street Playhouse started in
Right.
a supermarket over there.
Right.
So those
right.
are all,
J&J.
we've done some pretty clever things, and I'm sure we've made mistakes.
Right.
But I think by and large, the way we've done this thing,
Right.
and to get to where we are today, something we all pretty much proud of.
The only thing
I-
we didn't really talk about was the involvement of the hospitals.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
Bob Campbell is somebody that we're going to talk to. Are there other people? Do you know Steve Jones?
No, but I don't. I met him a couple of times, but he'd be good to talk
And
to.
can you just speak briefly about
I think-
the involvement of the
I think now this was a redevelopment of areas that needed it, that were done on a different basis. This was meeting specific healthcare needs, and pretty much were handled by the institutions themselves. But I think that's what helps attract. We were talking about a destination city. Well, you talk about a destination, and a lot of people, for them, it's one of their first experiences with the city of New Brunswick. A lot of people who live in this area
Right.
don't come to New Brunswick, and in fact don't know what's down here.
Mhm.
Well, this forced them to come in,
Right.
and I think also the fact that they're top class institutions. They're not, St.
Right.
Peter's and us, Cancer Institute.
So did Devco or New Brunswick Tomorrow
Works with them.
help to make the hospitals better so that it would be part of the redevelopment?
Devco works very closely
Mhm.
on the development of these things. In
Right.
fact, it was one of the construction management on a lot of these things. No, I think Devco worked very closely with many of the institutions up there because we had the know-how.
And did Molinari or Pay suggest that the hospitals
I don't
would
think
be...
I don't think he ever got around to that
Okay.
to that area. You can look at it.
Also, it was Middlesex General Hospital.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it was. That's right. But you know, it's when they call it a healthcare city, you can build a case. You can
Yeah.
make a case for that.
Right.
And yes, I'm sorry I didn't mention it, but we didn't have that much
Mhm.
involvement with actually doing it because they did it on their own. But Devco was deeply involved in it.
Mhm.
You got a new high school being built out here now too,
Mhm. Right,
and Devco's doing that.
right.
Devco did the Lord Sterling School,
Mhm.
which their legislation passed in Trenton,
Mhm.
where they say this should be an example of how you can coordinate a school like that with redevelopment.
Mhm.
The Rutgers police station is down there too. All these little things. The French Street was always something that bothered us.
Right.
You know, you walk, you get here and you walk, and it was, and we, you know, and we used to think about the pedestrian traffic back and forth at co-eds and stuff like that, and it was kind of dangerous at times, but that's working out now too. There are little steps that we've been taking regularly.
Mhm.
There is no idleness going on in this city, and I think that's one of the important things I would say. With all the success we've had, we don't sit back and say, okay, that's it. We're always looking for what still needs to be done,
Mhm.
and there's a lot needs to be done, and, you know, because it's a changing city, and it will always be that way.
Mhm.
So,
You know, the things going forward are often the most difficult.
no question about it.
The neighborhood.
Yes, yeah, there's no question about it.
Any last thoughts? on
David, I'm going to
anything?
have to go, so if you want to shut these things off when you're done, is that all right?
Okay, I hope I've been helpful to you.
You have been.
Okay.
I'm actually going to be in Mike's office, so if you need me.
You can, any other thoughts? We could just end it,
I'm trying to think. I'm sure there were some things.
You can always, I mean, we can always talk to you again, or you can send us stuff.
okay, so maybe we'll just.
Oh, let me,
Okay.
let me just give you some things. This is a speech that I wrote with John. He went out to Ohio. He was called out there. Today we got national recognition on it. And this speech was designed to take you from the very beginnings of how it came about
Mhm.
to where we were at that point. And I think if somebody wants to take the time to read
Sure.
this thing,
No.
Sure.
Also,
David's collecting all of
David,
them.
that's it. Don't lose that. That's another
No,
copy.
no.
And then we have the last Rutgers Eagleton poll, if you want
Oh,
the
yeah,
figures on
right.
that. And then
We're going to look at all of the results.
Okay.
Polls.
For the 30th anniversary, I went back and did a chronology. I guess it's
Right.
called.
Is that
Year
the
by
one that's
year.
on the NBT, on the NBT
We've seen that
website,
on
there's a
the-
chronology?
That's the one I did. But
Okay.
It's
That
in here.
would be- And actually, when the city had its 300th anniversary, they put together a little booklet of the
Yes.
history of New
Right.
Brunswick. So combined, it gives you a nice.
I think you're involved in an interesting project. Mm, as much as the fact that it's ongoing.
Mhm.
You know,
Right,
whatever you do now in a year,
Right.
there's going to be more stuff that has happened.
right. But we wanted to get back
wanted
to
to-
people who were at the
The
beginning.
origin.
Yeah, because we're not going to last that long,
And-
obviously, right?
Some people are already unable to help us, so,
Or gone.
right.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you, Dave. Good to
Yeah,
see you.
it's a pleasure. You have a wonderful memory.
Yeah.
Remember the study I was.
Well, it was one of the few positive things, one of the few positive reports we ever got out of a Rutgers professor. So you stand out in my memory.
Well, I always felt strong.
And incidentally, we still quote that some of those things. Yes, absolutely. Okay, Thea.
All right.
You still working with the State Theater group?
No, I went off the board.